Friday afternoon, Golden Black Live. It's 22nd of January. You don't even know what the date is, but we appreciate all of you tuning in. We want to thank our sponsors, Triple X on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. Hilton Garden Inn, when tomorrow's a big day, State HDI tonight. State Farm agent Trent Johnson. I'll move there. You can see his banner. We appreciate Trent. As he's been a great sponsor of us, and of course the good folks at WLFI for all they bring to the table. Brian, this is going to be in about 5 hours a really interesting college basketball game. It appears Purdue, Michigan, a lot of moving parts to this one, and you've got your preview up there. What do you watch for as much as anything as you look at this one? I mean, what will be the sure sign that this will be a 40-minute basketball game from your perspective?
Well, I want to see how Michigan comes out, for one thing. I kind of, as good as they've been the first half of the season, they were really good in the first half of last season too, and then plateaued a little bit mid-season. I wondered if the Minnesota loss wasn't a sign of that kind of taking hold again. I don't know how much they've necessarily been tested. I mean, I'm saying that about a team that's like 14-1 or whatever they are, and I understand that that they have been really good all year, but they haven't played Iowa yet. They haven't played Illinois yet. They haven't played a big-time road game yet in the Big Ten. They didn't play a high major opponent in non-conference because their Big Ten ACC game got postponed. So I think this is a moment where Michigan, can be really tested. I know they beat Wisconsin at home. They beat the hell out of Wisconsin at home. They beat the hell out of Northwestern at home, and they beat the hell out of Minnesota at home, but they haven't done it on the road yet. So I'm kind of interested to see how much Michigan legitimizes itself in what is really now a high-end road game, the way Purdue's playing right now. But I think Purdue's got a lot of bases to cover defensively. I think they have to play perhaps their best defensive game of the year tonight because you got to account for Dickinson. They have to manage to double team him and take him away without letting Isaiah Livers go off. I think Isaiah Livers is the toughest matchup for them in this game. And then they're surrounded by shooters. Everybody else on the floor can shoot. So Purdue's MO on defense is normally to ignore somebody who they're not worried about as a shooter on defense in order to give help elsewhere and try to play 5-on-4 wherever you can. But I don't know if Michigan affords you that luxury. So I think that's the biggest thing is how does Purdue, kind of build on success from a defensive perspective. They've been much better defensively the last couple of games than they were prior, and they've been really good when they've needed to be. Whether or not Purdue can do that for 40 minutes against an elite offensive team tonight, that's kind of what remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see.
Brian, you look in your preview, you talked about the key being that the play of those Purdue guards that you talked about a little bit earlier, the ability to attack off the dribble in particular. How you think that could be a key factor in tonight's game? I mean, we've seen what Jaden Ivey can do on the bounce, so to speak. Brandon Newman as well. Just sort of talk about the importance of those backcourt guys being able to get to the basket off the dribble here.
Yeah, I just think Purdue has to play with a certain aggressiveness offensively. I think that's the biggest difference right now between this team and last year's team is their guards look more mature, their guards look more empowered, their guards look more aggressive, and they're just trying to make plays instead of curling up in the fetal position against, physical, aggressive perimeter defense. And I think that's really important. I don't think anything's going to come easily for Purdue in half-court offense, and I think when they push the ball up the floor and they're aggressive and they get good shots quickly, but they're also smart about it, I think that's a fine line to walk, but I think that's a really important line for Purdue to walk too. So I thought Eric Hunter really, was better at Ohio State than his final stats reflected because I thought he really gave them a bump in the first half, really set a tone with his aggressiveness on offense and really got them through a portion of the game where they were kind of walking a fine line there because, I think Ohio State had gotten up 11 at one point and had that gets to 15, 14, whatever it is. I think Purdue would have been in a tough spot. But when you look at what Stefanovic did off the dribble with Justin Orange jumping out at him to take away the three, I thought that was a huge part of that game. Obviously, Jaden Ivey did some good things off the dribble. Isaiah Thompson attacked attacked a mismatch once in transition offense, made a three over. That's the sort of mentality I think Purdue needs to have. They need to get the ball inside as much as they can, but they also need to be threats all over the floor.
Yeah, a good sign at Ohio State, obviously, is Mason Gillis and Brandon Newman statistically did not have good games, and yet this is a team that's really interesting because they seem to find it other places, and Zach Edey, I thought, took steps in the right direction for the most part against Ohio State. That seems to be what you're going to see out of this team moving forward. Is just going to be enough moving parts, and Matt Painter will have to make sure he puts the guys in that literally have the hot hand or are getting it done. Does that seem to be the process moving forward from your perspective, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, it's with the Ohio State game, we talk a lot about Jaden Ivey. Obviously, he won the game for Purdue. Travion Williams keeps playing at a first-team All-Big Ten level, but look what they got from Zach Edey. Look what they got from Aaron Wheeler. Those guys played really well. I thought when Mason Gillis got in foul trouble, that was going to be a really big part of that game because, Purdue was going to have Wheeler out there for crunch time. And, his track record's kind of up and down on some things, but, he's out there in the final minute and he does everything right. He makes 4 enormous winning plays for Purdue in the final minute. And that speaks to, a good team is when everybody is ready to do exactly what they have to do when the opportunity presents itself. Travion Williams got in foul trouble in the first half, the last 2 games at Ohio State. I think Zach Edey played his best Big Ten game. And this was the same Ohio State team that was his first Big Ten game. And that was the first taste of Big Ten basketball he got, and he didn't handle it so well. And this time around, he was physical. He was confident. He was solid. He was really good on defense. And I think that's just kind of, as you said, when the opportunity presents itself to make a winning play, when you have a bunch of guys sitting there who are ready to do it, you have a chance to be a pretty good team.
And how about Sasha Stefanovic, Brian? I think you talked about it, wrote about it. When those defenders get in his face, his ability for himself to put the ball on the floor and get to the basket, that added dimension to his game may force defenders to back off him and give him some more space to shoot those 3-pointers we all know he's famous for.
Yeah, I think Ohio State put Justin Ahrens in a really tough spot because he's not the quickest footed fellow in the Big Ten, and you're asking him to run out and take away the 3, but then contain the dribble too. They don't give him a lot of help from secondary defenders. They don't really have a rim protector. They really asked a lot of Justin Ahrens, and that was kind of the flip side of why Purdue defends the way it does, is that give certain guys space so that you're able to contain the dribble that way. But you do it with guys who can't shoot. When you have to run out of the guy who can shoot in a situation like that, you're giving them a lot of room to dribble. And to Stefanovic's credit, he made the play every single time. Whether he's going to do that every game, whether he's going to do that against more athletic defenders, I don't know. But the fact that he's at least shown that he can do it might give opponents a little bit more to think about now, the rest of the season to come. But just a really big time game by Stefanovic. The last couple games, he's not getting a lot of good looks. But when the Red Sea parts and he gets that opportunity to get a good look, he makes it. And they were huge shots. The shot at Ohio State was huge. I can't remember what game it was where they just inexplicably backed off. They botched a switch and he just came wide open and just stuck it. But being ready to shoot when you're not getting many opportunities to shoot, I think is more of a challenge than people realize. But he's kind of always ready. And he's had a great year for Purdue. He's been an absolute rock for them all year long, and I don't think that'll change anytime soon. Yeah,
I think that's a good point about Stefanovic, is his being readiness, and that is one of the hardest things as a shooter, is knowing that you only get that short window. And I think that's the thing that not only now that he's shown he can drive a little bit, but it's knowing when to do it, and he has really, really gotten better in that area. All right, Tom, I'm going to switch gears, and we will have Chris Vallis and Brian and myself for segment 2, and we'll break down a lot more of the Purdue-Michigan game. But Tom, obviously, Jeff Brom fills out his defensive staff. impressive to me that he's got a lot of experience with the three guys that were hired to join Anthony Poindexter as well. But I like that. I think that's if you look at it from a staffing standpoint, three different views that get brought in and guys that have been around. On paper, it gives you a chance to build a good defense over time.
Yeah, no doubt. They got appreciably older across the board from a staff standpoint. I know Greg Brown was an older coach in his 60s. Diaco was in his 40s. Terrence Jamison was in his 30s. But now every one of these hires is over 50 years old with a lot of experience and head coaching experience too. We've written about and talked about Ron English, his background in Eastern Michigan. Of course, Brad Lambert being the head coach at a startup in Charlotte. Again, coordinator experience too for both those guys. So Purdue's bringing in a lot of experience to this defense to try to flip the script. And there's Mark Hagan, guys, who's been a co-coordinator himself at a few of his stops. So I tell you what, there's a lot to like. I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical as how this was going to turn out when we saw this attrition start to take place. But I'll tell you what, I'm impressed and enthused and optimistic about the prospects of this defense making some strides here with these additions to the staff defensively, and also getting a guy like Anthony Watts back. That became official this week as well. I tell you what, Neal's gone, but they got Watts back, and I tell you what, I think Watts is probably Neal's peer. In some ways, I think he plays with more fire and has more potential. So he can be a real anchor inside with Lawrence Johnson, I think, a tackle as well. And we know about Karloffis coming back up front. I like the linebackers' potential as well. What are they going to do with DeMarcus Mitchell, Jalen Graham, Jalen Alexander? We have, O.C. Brothers coming in. We have Joseph Anderson, the defensive end from South Carolina. There's a lot to like about that front seven. There's a lot to like about these coaching staff hires as well. So, and it's going to be fun to see these pieces start to get put together here shortly.
Brian, you look at Jeff Brom, and you've written about this as well, just in getting guys that have been around. And that I think all three of those guys may be actually older than Jeff is. Not that matters, but from a chronological age standpoint. But I think it tells you something maybe about a maturing process of your head football coach in terms that maybe it was necessity. We don't know all the details there, but again, your take on these three hires and how it will impact Purdue football in 2021 and beyond.
Well, I think they're all really experienced, and that's important. But I think experience can be a double-edged sword because I think you can't sell out energy. And I don't know these guys other than Mark Hagan, and I know energy is not going to be an issue with Mark Hagan. I don't know about the other guys, but you have to make sure that you still have energy, you still have the ability to relate to your players and connect with your players and all of that stuff. But experience also only matters if it's leveraged. And I think Jeff Brom now has a couple of really experienced sounding board types on his coaching staff, and if he seeks to leverage their experience, I think that could be beneficial. I think that's, probably something that could be a little bit of an advantage. It's our understanding Jeff Brom is going to be more involved with the defense from here on out. And, I think there's some value there too, because I think, obviously the head coach is accountable for everything that happens. The head coach's job is to set philosophy, and, I think that's important. Having guys who've been around and you can rely on to do their jobs, I think is important. I think, having stable people is important. They can't be doing this changing three coaches every year thing any longer, because at some point you just have to get some continuity going here. And I think the fact that these guys all seem like stable people and all of that stuff, I think that, that's an important step in the right direction here. But, these guys are going to have a good working relationship too. Collaboration is going to be really important. You hired a coordinator after you hired a couple of position coaches, if I recall correctly, and those guys are all going to have to be on the same wavelength. I think Brad Lambert's and Jeff Brom's relationship is going to be really important because, as I mentioned before, if Brom's going to be more involved with the defense, those guys are going to have more of a really good ability to collaborate. Whereas the head coach never wants to be the guy who only comes in and offers input when things aren't going well. And when, maybe he's not been part of the process, but it's just kind of passing down judgment on things. I think we've seen some examples over the years where, the head coach has said things after the game that kind of lead you to believe like, well, was he involved in the game plan? And, now I think it seems to us like that's going to change a little bit. And I think that's going to be an important part of the staff dynamic behind closed doors now is how do Jeff Brom and this new defensive staff, coexist together in terms of their working relationship.
Yeah, interesting comment and an interesting storyline. Transfer portal will continue to be a storyline, but also, Tom, that Purdue did get, we talked about Watts, but some other, we're starting to be a little clearer on who is going to be back. There's still room for bodies. Purdue can still certainly use some more deep defensive linemen if you can find them. You want to find guys that can play. This will be something you're going to be watching until spring practice and beyond, one would think.
Yeah, I mean, they had guys all the way up through the summer we've seen over the years. Yeah. So there's always chance for additions and, of course, subtractions as well. We still have another signing date coming up in February, right, for freshmen and any other stragglers to put their name to the national letter of intent. Talked about the portal, Alan. You earlier referenced the returning senior/grad transfers. The final total I have is 4 coming back, 2 on offense, 2 on defense. Of course, Jackson Anthrop, Greg Long on offense, and then defensively, we talked about Watts and the linebacker/defensive end, Samisi Fakasieki. All contributors, all can be very valuable members of this team, as we know, with their experience and their ability, especially Greg Long. Brian and I agree. He may be the most key, in addition to Watts, of those returnees. So, yeah, a lot to like, a roster that will always probably be in flux. We all expect Purdue to continue to shop in the portal. I think defensively, that's probably where we're going to see the additions. I could be wrong, but I still think a cornerback would be nice to land if you're Purdue as well. Maybe if you can get another defensive lineman, you talked about Allen, a tackle or an end. So it's always a lot of fun to see what's cooking in that portal for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a storyline to watch and then some because it's free agency in some way. And I'm not downplaying or bad-mouthing. I'm just saying that's kind of the nature of the beast these days. All right, we will take a short break here, a 2-minute break. Brian and I will zoom up Chris Ballas from thewolverine.com. Steve Lavin will join me in segment 3. And stay tuned. We'll have another stellar segment. This one was good, and we'll look forward to that for the rest of Gold and Black Live. Stay tuned.